Hi, everyone. Welcome to our February MCLE for San Diego defense lawyers. We are getting ready to start here momentarily. We'll do our best to start right at noon as I see the number of participants are trickling in. So we'll give people a couple minutes to join us and then try and get started here in the next couple minutes once it looks like we have the majority of people have been able to join in. So just bear with us for a minute or so, and then we'll get going. Probably right at 12:01 is what we'll shoot for.
So prompt.
Yes.
I always feel like we need to have music at the beginning of some of these webinars. So like, okay, let's get this party started.
The San Diego Defense Bar just runs like a train here. It's like, love it.
We know people have things to do, and we're appreciative that they give us an hour of their time.
Yes.
All right, looks like it's 12:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Ian Friedman. I'm one of the board members with San Diego Defense Lawyers. We appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to join us for our monthly CLE. We are thankful to have two exceptionally talented presenters with us today who are going to share with us information about how to make a positive appearance on our next remote appearance, which is what we're all unfortunately stuck with right now. Alicia Aquino is a NCRA accredited trial technology consultant and a member of the American Society of Trial Consultants. She's a seasoned veteran in the legal industry and offers comprehensive trial support to help legal teams prepare for and succeed at trial. She handles everything from trial prep to jury analysis, mock trials, graphics, and the like, and is a great addition to your next trial team. Shannon Bales is the Merger, Tolles and Olson Litigation Support Manager. He has served on the California Lawyers Association Law Practice Management and Technology Section Executive Committee as a member. He was the White House Executive Trainer and Advisor on e-discovery. And Mr. Bales was also a UN War Crimes Advisor looking at Cambodia and Rwanda on litigation support technology and investigations, as well as being an adjunct professor at UCLA on trial technology and fact analysis. So with that, Shannon Bales and Alicia Aquino, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody who's attending. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity to share several tips and best practices so you can excel and make an impact at your next virtual court appearance. And before we get started, by raise of hands, so I can gauge, well, I can't even see the audience. So I guess maybe this isn't going to be too helpful, but I kind of wanted to see how many of you have attended a remote hearing or deposition, and maybe you can use the chat feature for this. How many of you have attended a remote trial? And then how many of you have converted your office, conference room, or your home office into a virtual studio or courtroom? So if you just want to maybe answer those and put them in the chat box, and then I can take a look at it in a bit. And then Shannon, I'll let you lead the way.
Well, you all knew we had to start with this, the cat lawyer. You know, nothing has taken the internet more by storm than the cat lawyer video. And while I have seen many cats wander through virtual proceedings, children running through, spouses cleaning in the background, all types of things are occurring in the virtual hearing environment. And so that's what we're here today to talk to you about. we want to talk to you about some of the best practices in conducting a virtual proceeding. We want to arm you with, which equipment you may want to use, setting up your home studio, and just what we're seeing in the industry and the courts right now. Now, virtual proceedings are just one piece of your trial planning. It's an important piece, right? Because it's how you present yourself to fact finders in the courtroom or a deposition or whatever virtual proceeding you're conducting. But you also have to have other areas of your trial planning in order for virtual proceedings to take off correctly. So you need to have your exhibits in order and your video edited and your staffing and logistics questions answered. So one of the first things is, give me 1 second here. Where are we now with COVID in the courts? Vaccines, court closures. We're seeing a hodgepodge of some courts trying to open up, like down in San Diego. We're seeing other courts try to conduct virtual proceedings, and probably in the middle is something we're going to talk about in a minute, hybrid proceedings where some are virtual and some are in person, which I think is probably the wave of the future for quite some time. What is a virtual or remote proceeding? So it's an official proceeding conducted online. As attorneys, you all know that, but where attorneys often go wrong is they treat virtual proceedings like virtual meetings. In a virtual meeting, we're very, we don't care if the camera is going up the person's nose or the lighting isn't all that great. But in a virtual proceeding, you want that newscaster-like look where you are filling the screen, you're well lit, people can hear you and you can hear and see them. So the planning that we're talking about today doesn't just cover how you present yourself, but it also gives you things to consider about how you may want to present your witnesses and how they look on screen and how you might prepare them for a virtual proceeding, right? Because it doesn't do any good if you look like, the 60 Minutes newscaster and they look like, someone who's in witness protection with a bad camera and lighting and doesn't know which way to look at the camera. Now, as I mentioned before, we're seeing, you're all used to the in-person hearing and trial. That's where we're all in the courtroom, and we're all used to that. What we're seeing now are some virtual proceedings starting to get off the ground, where everyone attends the hearing or trial remotely. That's a different level of complexity. But believe it or not, as a trial technology expert, the thing that's hardest for us to plan and that the wave of trials that are to come are going to be the hybrid and remote hearing and trials. The ones where some people are going to be in person and some people are going to be virtual. And this really looks to be what the future holds for courts and virtual proceedings. It's one thing to go in and plan out a courtroom and bring it in and take down the cables and bring in a projector or a screen and all of that. But now we have to actually assess each witness's and participants' technical environment with which cameras do they have? Do they have the right equipment? Do we need to rent equipment with them? How are we going to get them set up? Who's going to set it up? Do they have fast enough internet? All of these different things that we want to consider so that our witnesses look good, right? So it's actually much more complex than just an in-person or just a virtual hearing. And you all know the complexity of just conducting an in-person trial and using technology. There was an article on Law 360, the source is listed below, with key takeaways from a virtual civil jury trial. The first thing is that you need to prepare your witnesses, and the legal team must be prepared with technology so that you appear credible on the screen. In other words, you need to have practiced with the technology, you need to be comfortable with technology and integrate it into your arguments so that you can influence witnesses, influence fact finders. When you have technical error and delay, it is it pays a price in terms of your credibility. So a lot, when I was a private consultant like Alicia, it was very difficult at times to get people to practice with the technology. It may not be something that's at the forefront of what you're thinking about when you're thinking about your arguments, but it's just as important as you dressing right for trial, or your practice opening statement or your practice closing statement. How do you integrate technology into your arguments? And this is especially true for the virtual environment. Juror attention span, you got to be careful about slide after slide after slide. So you need to make good decisions about what you're going to present, how you're going to present it, and develop your story at trial. So you may want to mix up, slides in a PowerPoint with trial presentation software, and perhaps the document camera or some other ways to break it up. Break up the presentation so it keeps jurors focused, and really make good decisions about what goes on screen. And Alicia's going to cover this here.
Yeah, so I see a couple of mentions in the chat box about what's going on in San Diego. Yes, yesterday was the first time, I believe it was 8,000 jurors they summoned, 5,000 were qualified, and I believe the number that I got was 80 jurors actually attended. So yeah, jurors are still scared to show up for jury duty. And some courts are still very resistant. They're just waiting it out. We'll see you in trial in 2022. Well, because I'm a technology trial consultant, I've actually been monitoring what's been going on around the nation. And so there have been successful remote online trials and hybrid trials. Here's just a couple of examples, from East Coast to West Coast. If anybody is interested about what's going on throughout the nation, Law 360, there's a website, and I put the link on the bottom, but it's an interactive map. You can hover over the state, and then it shows what's going on, what's the latest, are there in-person proceedings, remote proceedings, are there in-person trials, and then you can get additional information. And I would love for San Diego to start implementing more remote trials, because I feel that we are at this time that jurors will show up, but they will definitely feel more comfortable showing up from their home instead of, like we saw yesterday, of the only 80 jurors. And so we're going to go through some more stuff. Let's see, go ahead, the next slide. There we go. So today we're going to talk about three main things that Shannon kind of already covered, but we're going to talk about the platform settings and how to look your best, and of course, keeping your audience engaged.
So there's 4 principles to kind of guide you here when you're using technology in the courtroom. First is know your timeline. With virtual proceedings, equipment may be hard to obtain. It's still kind of hard to get a high-end external webcam, for example. You want to have control over you want to treat this like a project. So good project management is essential. You want to know who your witnesses are, what data you have for them. For example, when they were deposed, do you have video? Is that video synchronized? Does it play well on screen, virtually? And have discussed workflow with your support teams so that exhibits can be created efficiently and quickly. We know what video is going to be played. How will documents be blown back and shipped, maybe if you want to send documents in a sealed envelope for opening on screen in a virtual depot, for example. How will those be created and shipped, and what's the timeline for that? Last, you really want to understand, you would really want to create internal firm standards for virtual proceedings. We're seeing many law firms create virtual studios within their offices. There's a lot of tips and tricks on that, in that you may not want a bunch of people in the same room due to coronavirus, or it's very hard also to have 2 people on a microphone in the same room. So we're having to space people out across different offices, different internal offices at the firm, so that they can present well on the screen. Some of the addendums to those 4 principles that we've developed with virtual proceedings. some of the new standards that you really want to have these discussions in advance. Do you have the right equipment? How will you communicate between team members if you're all in different offices, right? Are you going to text each other or an email? Are you going to have multiple screens set up so that you can still have your email going, for example, on one screen and your presentation on another? A lot of people make the mistake of trying to do this on an iPad or trying to do it just on one single laptop, where you won't see anyone bigger than a postage stamp, and you won't be able to view the graphics that are being put up on the screen. So it's very important that all of these different pieces of the puzzle come together well in advance of your virtual proceedings, because you really are seeing a line drawn in the, a virtual line drawn in court proceedings where you have people that are doing it right and people that are doing it wrong. And it just presents so poorly into your credibility if you show up and you're in the lower right-hand corner of your screen in the darkness, with not looking at the camera, and you're just not prepared. And we're seeing that over and over again. And first blush impressions by fact finders are that some parties are credible and some aren't. I can't emphasize enough that a virtual trial or a virtual proceeding is a real trial. How many people and attorneys that we see come in and they're just not prepared. They may not be dressed correctly. They may be laying down on their sofa. They just are presenting in all these ways that they would never even think of doing if they were in an actual courtroom. And they haven't put the time in to separate a virtual legal proceeding from a virtual meeting. So, you want to make sure that you have the right internet speed and backups of all your software. Wear pants and appropriate attire. Can't tell you how many people are showing up without the right clothes. Put your pets in a different room so they're not crawling across your desk in the middle of the proceeding. Or, I was just at a hearing where the person's cat came into the room and sat right over their shoulder, and for an hour and a half just sat back there meowing, meow, meow, meow. And it was so distracting and so irritating. And eventually, they were asked to get your cat out of the room. So, and it can be a very delicate situation, given that people's children may be at home with them as well, especially witnesses. And so you need to use your diplomatic skills to figure out what it's going to be like if your kids are on Zoom virtual school and you're also trying to do a Zoom trial. Right this second, I have twins downstairs doing a Zoom schooling. And so we've done analysis of our network to make sure that it can handle the different things that are going on at any one time. Someone goes to the different room and starts playing Netflix. There goes your bandwidth, right? So you need to consider your presentation environment. Alicia?
All right. Shannon, that's very funny because I was in trial and one of our experts, they were testifying and their two dogs were stuck in the room, and the entire time the dog was scratching at the door. And instead of the court saying, let's take a quick break, can you let your dog out? It went probably 45 minutes, and it's right. Yeah, it's very, very distracting. So the next couple of slides, these are actually Zoom settings. I'm using Zoom to show examples, but I do understand that most courts, so the statistic is that most courts are using Zoom, but I'm aware that San Diego is using Microsoft Teams, Orange County is using WebEx. So anything that you see that you would like further instructions on how to do, I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards, but the next couple of slides will be specifically with Zoom. So the most important thing before you start your meeting is you want to make sure that you're using the latest version. So this video is just showing you how to do the updates of Zoom. Perfect. And luckily, Zoom is actually, they're listening to the users. I know for the legal field, they've incorporated so many different features. And so, for example, just in the last couple of weeks, they've made 2 additional updates. So I'm finding myself updating constantly. All right, so the next one is the dual monitors. The dual monitors is very helpful. So thinking of a proceeding, your main screen, you're going to have, say, your notes, your bullet points, the people that the attorney, well, the attorneys, the clients, the judges on one screen, and then you'll have your presentation on another screen. And so just being able to really maximize your real estate. And so you'll want to enable that dual monitor in advance. I was in a hearing and the attorney wanted to, well, I've also tried this, but it didn't work too well. You have to change the setting before you go into the meeting. If you set up dual monitors and then, oh, it's not working. So just make sure that you practice in advance.
And this really goes to your ability to see and get a feel for the witnesses, right? If the witness's face is as big as a postage stamp, you're not going to know if they're angry or sad or how they're communicating to you, the cues you would receive in court. If they're big and put up on a big screen somewhere where you can really take a look and practice your advocacy skills the way you would in an actual courtroom, taking advantage of these features is important. One last quick comment. The teams that make the most out of these features are going to have the advantage in court. Whose graphics can be seen and whose can't. So sorry, Alicia, didn't mean to break in there.
No, those are all really good points. All right, let's go to the next slide. And this is just what it looks like for dual monitors. If you're hosting a meeting or if you plan on presenting the evidence, I suggest using two devices. The first device is how you'll be used. Well, let me just back up there. The host device is where everybody will be able to view the meeting from. And then the secondary device is using when you're doing the screen share. Because I don't know about you, when you use your screen share, then everybody gets this big and then you just get lost of where your presentation is and your notes. So that's why if you are hosting or sharing evidence, having two monitors is sometimes helpful.
And you really want to be able to see what's going on from the courtroom view as well. So having an additional computer at times where you can see what's going on, what the general public is seeing, let's say like a YouTube feed or something along those lines, can be helpful as well.
Exactly, because when you're sharing your screen, you may think that you're sharing your PowerPoint, but maybe you're actually sharing your emails. Yes. And so having that second device of what everybody else is seeing is sometimes a really good idea.
Yeah, and you just turn the volume down on that, and it's just a good way for you to monitor what's going on in the courtroom.
Absolutely. So internet speed, Shannon touched on this. It's the number one issue of remote appearances. When you're going in slow motion or the audio, it's more than likely because your bandwidth is poor. Here's a quick little video of how to do a test of your internet. And it's not just the person who, for yourself, but it's anybody on your trial team who's going to appear, your witnesses. If you're an expert witness or your fact witnesses, make sure that they have the bandwidth. If they don't have strong internet bandwidth, then let's get them set up in a court reporter's office or some other location where they have strong bandwidth, because that's the worst thing of it's finally your time to shine and your client gets up there. Well, we can't hear your client. And then it delays the court by 20, 30 minutes. And then the judge is frustrated or irritated because you didn't test in advance. So internet speed is extremely important.
I really like setting people up in a hotel room because the hotels typically have really good internet, and you can go in advance and set up some equipment and then give them the hotel room key and they're all set and ready to go. Let me go ahead and start the video.
So for a general Zoom, if you have more than 25, you should be good. If you're streaming video, if you have a lot of impeachment clips, you may want to get more into the 50 range. But most residences are probably standard is 25. But what I'm noticing, some people will use a hotspot, or if it's 5, anything less than 5, it gets a little wishy-washy. We just cross our fingers and hope that they don't have any bandwidth issues.
That's right.
All right, so the next slide. I remember when all these remote hearings, that's all we heard all the time was Zoom bombing. And I actually haven't heard any Zoom bombing recently, but the security concern, our courts, because the access to justice that we have to provide, in most courts, they have to provide a way for the public to view a court proceeding. And so this is actually from San Francisco. They provide the meeting ID and password. And I know in San Diego, in family law, they provide the link. And so the bad part about that is that because it's public, anybody can click that link at any time. And so just be cautious if you do have any say so. What I've seen successful is if you have a private Zoom account and then the Zoom can be streamed to, say, YouTube, and then YouTube link is provided to the public. So that way, you know specifically who's entering into your room. If you are hosting the meeting, just make sure that enable the waiting room. I think that's really smart to make sure you know the attorneys, you know the witness. It just enables you to have more control. So these next slides is, again, just customizing your view, understanding the difference between gallery and speaker view. Go to the next one. And if this looks familiar, so every court is different, but there are some times where you have your tech, your paralegal, your co-counsel, say your trial team is 10 attorneys. But really the only attorneys that should have their cameras on are the one that's doing the direct or cross-examination, maybe opposing counsel, the judge, the court reporter, and then the witness. So typically I'll suggest that everybody turn their camera off, but when you turn the camera off, then their black boxes show. So if we go to the next slide, I suggest hiding the non-video participants. And so you'll find any black box, go to the three dots, scroll down, hide non-video participants. You can also change this in your default settings to allow to hide the non-video participants in every meeting going forward. Go ahead and the next slide. And so understanding the difference between pinning and spotlight. So pinning is where you want to place the individual juror or the individual. Zoom has the ability that you can move the tiles. The other platforms don't so much, but it's important, sometimes you want the judge here and the witness here, or you want the attorney doing the examination and the witness. And so being able to pin and multi-pin and understanding that that is an option, because some people don't know that they have the ability to customize the view on their screen. So just learning those features and putting them to your use to make it look better for your presentation.
Right, and if you do speaker view and someone's typing on their keyboard, as people often do in these virtual proceedings, it will switch to them while the witness is testifying. So everyone might miss that person's facial expressions and testimony in favor of hearing either the keyboard clacking.
Right, because by default, the speaker view automatically, whoever is speaking or wherever the audio is getting picked up on. And so the judge could be typing or somebody's sneezing. And so that's why if you pin, then it just keeps it consistent and the boxes aren't jumping around. This is actually what I was talking about, moving the participants, which is really cool. So you can just drag and drop. Again, this is Zoom, so it allows you to drag and drop. If you are doing voir dire, you can put them in order, 1, 2, 3. You can move them in alphabetical. And so this is extremely helpful and a nice tip.
I mean, there really are, taking the time to learn the ins and outs of the different apps and how you can use them to your benefit in the courtroom, the virtual courtroom, really can give you kind of an advantage in presentation over the other side that is just accepting whatever the environment is. So, for example, asking the judge, can you take advantage of the dual monitor environment and provide them an extra monitor if they need an extra monitor. Maybe you want to provide bigger monitors for everyone so they can really see your graphics and focus in on that. These are all things that you may want to be considering. Speaking of online platforms, this is a study by the National Judicial College of Online Platforms. By far, Zoom is the most often used platform. This study is about 6 months old now, maybe a little, right about 6 months old, I think. And it's Zoom followed by WebEx. We're seeing, again, Skype and Microsoft Teams being used quite a bit locally, WebEx. You know, it might be worth it if the judge is frustrated with their particular system to suggest. Don't be afraid to suggest to use a system that is that you're more comfortable with, or you think that might work a little bit better. We're also seeing, and we'll cover in a little bit, that people are looking at backup platforms for really large matters. Doesn't have to be that large of a matter, but large matters in case things go down. For example, Zoom went down on the first day of school for a lot of people. What to look for in a virtual court platform. So we really like the ability to use a third-party service provider for hosting. A lot of your deposition vendors are doing this. Great trial consultants like Alicia are doing this. And using that third-party hosting vendor is really great, just in case any accusations of technical malfeasance come up, or you don't want to be in the business also of providing technical support to your opposing counsel. You want to look at how you would share exhibits. Does it have specialized software for exhibit sharing built into it? We've talked a lot about a webinar versus a meeting and a virtual proceeding. You may want to explore where is it saving the video, because believe it or not, a lot of the depot vendors, they're all over the board where that save of the proceeding video may occur. It may occur locally. It may be up in the cloud. You may have clients that are not comfortable with cloud capture of your video. Also, are they using a backup method to capture the video in case there's some technical problem? Is the platform browser or app based? So stick with the big ones. Stick with the Zooms, the WebEx, the Teams. You don't want to be blazing new territory on virtual proceedings here, using apps that haven't been really vetted. Also, how can you customize the webinar with audio and video, dual monitors, all of the things that Alicia showed you a moment ago to your benefit. We also discussed the non-video participants, and so that your support staff can view and maybe help out, but keep them camera off. Keep them off camera. Guys like me. The new environment. What we're we really do recommend that you supplement your laptop with additional equipment. Right off the bat, you should have a higher end webcam than what is included in your laptop, an external microphone so you're not shouting at your computer. A lot of us have the standing desk, so you can provide your arguments while standing or sitting to approximate the courtroom environment. Dual monitors are essential. I actually am using 3. A lot of the proceedings that I've set up for our attorneys at the firm I work for are using 2 to 3 monitors, and maybe an iPad for their email and that kind of thing, just so it's off camera. No potential for that. Good lighting. So if you can use natural light, that's the best. We're going to talk in a minute. We don't really think that ring lights are very good. They're a little overly harsh. Many firms are creating a specialized studio with podiums and different pieces of technology in them so that they can approximate the courtroom environment and you're just ready to go for these virtual proceedings. Consider a standing desk, as we mentioned before. Audio issues. So Alicia discussed this a little bit before. Most of the audio issues are caused by not enough bandwidth by the person participating. Immediately when you start to see that kind of disconnect between video and audio in a proceeding, you can pretty much chalk it up to the bandwidth issue. And so when you get an invite from any of these online platforms, they always have a voice call in number. So the troubleshooting right off the bat is to get them on, rather than spend an hour trying to figure it out, keep them on video, mute their laptop, and get them on the phone. And that typically takes care of the problem right away. Again, you should be evaluating your witnesses and experts, technical environment, and whether you need to supplement that or provide them a MiFi device or increase bandwidth or a location to go to present effectively when they're at trial. Because there would be nothing worse than getting your expert on screen and immediately having to go into troubleshooting for them for an hour, which will delay the court. We don't suggest the ring lights. They provide the devil eyes, as you can see here on Alicia, and it just can look weird. Also, don't like the headsets. So get a good microphone, and you won't need a headset, and a good external microphone. Prepping your studio. What we want to see here is the camera at eye level, right? We don't want to be looking at your nose or down from a corner. A lot of firms are using their former conference rooms, so the camera's at the end of a long table, and they're seated diagonally to the camera or alongside the camera. No, you want to be more like a TV newscaster in the center of your screen. Most of the external cameras that you buy have some sort of app. I use the Logitech Brio camera, which I highly recommend. And it has an app that allows me to configure how much it zooms in on me, because it doesn't do any good if you have an external camera, if someone puts it halfway in the middle of your conference table and you still look like a postage stamp sized thumb in the lower right hand corner of your video screen. So getting that configured, getting the app, making the necessary adjustments for whatever environment you're in is very, very important. The external microphone is good because the included microphone on your laptop, first of all, is probably not a very high quality microphone. Second, you'll probably have your laptop a little bit further away from you than you would in a virtual meeting, which means you might be shouting at it from across your desk or wherever you're standing or sitting from. So having a microphone that you can place right in front of you is very important. Remove distracting pictures or sensitive information. I think you can see over my right hand shoulder, I've covered some things that are sensitive to my firm. Be careful when you have multiple devices. So you can't have two people, for example, in the same conference room, two attorneys, and then both of you have your microphones opened up and going. You're going to get those horrible feedback sounds that you hear, and it's just going to create an echo, and it's going to be terrible. So you need to be either using one single audio system or placed in separate conference rooms. This is essential. Be careful.
Oh, sorry, Shannon.
No, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to quickly note, I know that so always have extra sets of headphones laying around, and be careful of the Bluetooth headset.
Yeah.
Especially if you are attending court 8 hours, you don't want to start talking and then the battery start dying. So just make sure that you have a backup at all times.
That's right. Some people are appearing on their iPhones and all sorts of other things. You want a good, high quality piece of equipment that can handle all of these issues. An iPad probably is not the right thing to be using for your virtual proceedings.
I agree.
Virtual backgrounds. So I think Alicia is using one. I am not. A number of courts and a number of parties are agreeing that you may not want to have a virtual background. And the reason why is they're protecting against someone sitting behind you or under you, feeding the answers to a witness or something along those lines. So it may be something you want to consider when you are talking about it, whether you would want virtual backgrounds or not. Test sites, you can always go through, and we have them here in the presentation, to test your equipment in advance. Highly recommend this. You should also be talking to the court before your hearing starts to suggest that before the actual hearing that you get a chance to test your equipment. There's nothing worse than, the judge coming up to the bench and sitting down and, getting everyone together and everyone's on the screen. And then the very first word is, this isn't working. I need to do 30 minutes of troubleshooting. So if you can protect yourself from most problems, not all, but most problems, just by going through some of these test procedures that you see here, where they test your bandwidth and that kind of thing. And then also requesting with the court to do a test connection the day before your hearing or something along those lines. So we can't recommend enough. I know I know I can read Alicia's mind, how important testing in advance is, testing your witnesses. Remember, this presentation that we're giving today is not just about you, the attorney. It's about your witnesses, your experts, the people participating in the courts, that everything is tested in advance. Everything is that you have the right equipment, that you're ready to go when the judge says, let's get started.
And another thing to add on that, Shannon, is testing with the same device, the same microphone,
Yes,
the same location, the same bandwidth, because it defeats the purpose of
yes,
doing a tech check if, when they're actually appearing in front of the judge, that they're, say, in a hotel room that may not have
Right.
good Wi-Fi, or you're not using, you know, the special Yeti, or you're, you know, the lighting, or
Right.
maybe the hotel room is echoed, or, you know, so you want to make sure that when you're doing that tech check, same device, same location, same bandwidth, everything's the same.
Absolutely agree. You're wasting your time if you go in with some other piece of equipment. You want to know how the equipment you're going to use is going to react in that environment. Coordination and practice. Alicia's going to cover a lot of this, I believe. Actually, there's a slide or two for me on this. Some of the topics for negotiation in advance of the hearing, you know, where the cameras might be placed, phones and smartwatches, so people aren't getting messages during the proceeding. What will you do if there's a technical failure? Do you have a backup? If you're using Zoom and you're using WebEx as a backup, if you have WebEx, do you have Zoom as a backup? How will you record the proceedings if you're recording the proceedings? Use of breakout rooms, virtual backgrounds that we just discussed. You know, whereas there's a lot of issues with hearing timing. You know, if you know, are you going to start at 6 o'clock in the morning if you have an East Coast trial? What are you going to do? So thinking about these things in advance is very important. Hardware and equipment set up for witnesses, arbitrators, judges, clients, and counsel. Do your best to dictate the presentation environment. It doesn't do you very much good if your witness is sitting there straining at the screen because they're just using their laptop or an iPad or something like that, and they don't present well in hearing when you could have rented them a courtroom, rented them 2 monitors and a laptop that work well. There's also a set of devices out now for Zoom, specifically devices called, I think they're called a D10, D-T-E-N, used in education mostly. That's an all-in-one device that's about 27 inches that will allow, so you could potentially ship that to them, and it has, you know, multiple microphones and cameras and all that on it for ease of setup and use. And identifying people and the participants when you first sign on, you might want to think about having people's names listed along with the firm they're working at. Other topics: who sends the invitations? When will you test the system? The backups, we talked about that. How will witnesses be sequestered or separated potentially? Is their counsel going to be in the conference room with them? Are they allowed to be in there? Who's allowed to be in the room when they're giving testimony? Hard copy exhibit exchange timelines. How to deal with one party if one party drops off of a video conference due to a technical error. Will you switch over to a phone? And how will you divide these costs up amongst the parties? And then Alicia's going to cover roles in a virtual setting.
Is everybody overloaded with all that information? Yeah, so setting up for a virtual, especially for a virtual trial, there's a lot that goes into it. And so now we have all the different roles in a virtual setting, you know, the court reporter, the trial tech, And this new role, kind of all of the logistics that Shannon just talked about, we're calling it a technical bailiff. And think of it as like they're the producer, they're the robot arms, they're making sure that all of the logistics behind the scenes, they're checking in the parties. Is it a jury trial? Are they handling the breakout rooms? And sometimes the courts are allowing to have a third party come in and host the trial. And so that would be myself of the technical bailiff, and I'm handling all the logistics. Some courts have hired a new staff that it's, it could be somebody within their IT department. Some courts we're seeing that there's actually 2 people. So maybe one person handling the exhibits, one person handling the breakout rooms, one person handling making sure that the recording to Zoom is proper. And so there's a lot of moving components and people involved to make sure that the entire process goes seamless. So the technical bailiff is something that I'm able to facilitate and help with, and I'm helping courts from East Coast to West Coast and also attorneys. Because, maybe if you don't have a budget, but I could at least help show you how to maneuver through several of these things that Shannon just talked about.
Right. Highly recommend. Also highly recommend a good trial tack to keep things moving. The difference between using a trial tack and trial presentation software versus just sharing a screen is night and day. The trial tack has specialized software that allows them to focus in on relevant portions of text within a document and highlight and underline and do all of those things. And it ends up being a huge time saver and of interest to the jury, keeps things interesting for the jury, which we're going to talk about in a second. And you must practice this interaction between your tech and yourself. But, just sharing your screen, I don't know if you've been in any virtual deposition where you share an exhibit and everyone has control over the individual PDFs. So, one party is on page 2, the opposing party is on page 5, the witness is on page 3 or having trouble opening the exhibit. So what you may want to do in that situation is send the exhibit around, but then focus everyone's attention using the trial software. And that just keeps things moving, people and focused. It really is a huge time saver. You need to keep the audience engaged. And as I discussed earlier, using a variety of presentation techniques is important. Being careful about what you put on screen is important. There was a great article called What Juries Really Think, Practical Guidance for Trial Lawyers, dealing with legal technology dealt with a little bit on legal technology in the courtroom. The references in the lower left-hand corner. But what jurors liked the most was good organization, preparation, and efficiency, your delivery or style of presentation. So that really means how do you incorporate the technological aspects of your presentation into the virtual proceeding. If you were to look at this study and see what they disliked the most, it was when it was the exact opposite of these responses. It was when they were unorganized, unprepared, and inefficient. We see that a lot. Delivery, and they had bad delivery in their presentation, bad presentation skills. As an independent consultant, and seeing the amazing Alicia Aquino here, who is an independent consultant, my biggest frustration were attorneys that did not practice with me their openings or closings or their witness examinations. And if you don't practice with them, I can keep up with you. I can do those things as a trial tech, but there's nothing better than a well-oiled machine of timing and presentation. A lot of attorneys don't put the right exhibit numbers in their outline and never have any contact with their trial tech before the actual presentation, and end up just being a mess, virtually or otherwise, where the presentation isn't seamless and they may not know what how to call up the exhibits that are coming up there. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, these are just a couple of slides. When you're sharing your screen, like if you are, say, using Adobe, if you have any impeachment clips, make sure that you also click Share Computer Sound, because if you share a video, maybe the jurors, it's pointless if the jurors can't hear it. So it's very important to know to click share computer sound. The next slide is, understanding the difference between sharing your screen and sharing an application. So say, for example, I just want to share Adobe, but what if I, that would just be the application, just Adobe. Well, what if you want to jump to Google and you want to show in live a specific website? That's sharing the screen. So if you share the screen, you have the ability to share, pull up different applications, and it's just more functionality. But sharing the application itself, you can only share the application that's on that screen. So some people don't know the difference, and so hopefully that's helpful.
And what I like to do is have that extra screen. I like to actually share my screen and not the application. So I just consider that second screen or third screen the presentation environment, and anything that goes over there is the live environment, and allows me to set it up in a way that keeps makes sure that I have a good line between what I don't want people to see and what I do want people to see.
And if you know you're going to share your screen, specifically Adobe, because I'm just thinking of evidence, have the document up in advance, and because that's what causes delay of, okay, if you already know that you're going to put up exhibit 68, page 3, have it on your screen. So all you have to do is when you're cross-examining that witness is you just hit screen share and it's automatically up there. Because think about, now that our attention is directly in the monitor, what you think takes 2 or 3 seconds seems like it's taking forever. And everybody's just annoyed, like, oh my goodness, what they're finding that, they have to go through their file explorer and scroll through, and it just takes a lot of time. So that's one thing that could help you make sure that you have it on your screen in advance. The other thing is when you're in presentation mode, make sure that it's in full screen before you do share screen. And so this example is actually, the one on the bottom is PowerPoint. And then if you're using Canva, just make sure that it's in presentation mode and then share your screen, because you can see all the different tabs. This is a real example, but all the tabs, nobody, the court doesn't want to see your personal information. They don't want to see that you're shopping on Amazon or, whatever's going on in the tabs. And, I get nosy. So make sure presentation, try to avoid sharing anything that you don't want the court or other parties to see.
Right, and again, trial presentation software is great at this. One of the best practices here is to make sure that you're giving your outline to your trial tech, and it mentions all the exhibits by exhibit number that you're going to use. So I would also recommend putting little screenshots of the sections of the document that you're going to call out, and this allows you to move in a seamless manner when you're working with a trial technology expert like Alicia.
I'm going to zoom through this, but breakout rooms, Zoom now allows you the ability to jump from room to room if you are given the permission from the court. So for example, breakout rooms would be nice if you're on a break. Maybe your witness is in Spain and you're in the conference room, and then you're a co-counsel or opposing counsel. So it's just the breakout rooms, and I just wanted to let you know that that was an option within Zoom. Shannon talked about this, the messaging. Because Zoom and the platforms, they actually do not have the ability, because if you do chat, it's going to be broadcasted to all participants. So try to create some other back channel, so Slack, Google Hangout, Teams, iMessage.
It replaces the little yellow notepad that you would pass in court, right?
Right.
So just want to distinguish real quick between exhibit sharing software, which you see with a lot of deposition companies, and trial presentation software. Exhibit sharing software allows you to load up a bunch of exhibits so that the other side can't see them in advance, and then provide them to them at the appropriate moment. It's a bit wonky. They provide the absolute basics. Typically, it lets everyone's be on their own individual page of the document. You can't really lead them through it like you can with trial presentation software. Here's some of the leaders in the industry: Trial Director, OnCue, Sanction, TrialPad if you're going to use an iPad of some kind. It's important that you learn the language of trial presentation so that you communicate well with your trial tech. You want to provide them the outlines, as we talked about. use exhibit numbers. The language of communication in court should be your exhibit number. If you need to describe it as the memo or the contract or something like that, you supplement with that exhibit number, so that everyone has the correct reference for the exhibit. I always recommend doing a tutorial where the exhibit number is on the exhibit, and how to navigate it. Trust your trial tech to follow you along and underline and use color and all of these kinds of things, so that it can be a little bit more interesting for the fact finders, the judge and jurors. A lot of people only highlight in yellow and that's it, and that's very boring, so don't do that. Use color, zoom in, highlight, underline, just go with it. And I bet you will get better feedback from your juries on the professionalism of your presentation and how interesting it was. Exhibits and video, Alicia went through this. You need to make sure that your apps are enabled for video. Again, we talked about pinning the witness, speaker view, and those kinds of things a little bit earlier. There's a lot of companion software that helps you prepare exhibits in advance. For example, for Bates numbering, we like something called Easy Bates or Total Commander to rename a lot of exhibits. This is probably too technical for this presentation, but understand that your support staff probably could use these. And I bet you, typically when you hire a great trial tech, they already have these things to be able to help support you. So talk to them about the run-up and preparation of trial. Is just as important as them being in the courtroom itself with you. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to practice, to test and retest your environment. And it just is one of the things that really goes a long way to making sure your courtroom environment works well and is free of as many technical difficulties as possible. I can't say they're going to be absolutely free. I'm not the captain, the maker of the Titanic. So do have a process and procedure in place should something go wrong. Oh, okay, someone's off. Let's stop the proceedings and get everyone back online. Be cooperative in your setup plans with opposing counsel. Try to use a neutral third-party equipment rental vendor. Be careful in terms of burden shifting with exhibit and video exchanges, because people try to get away with not naming files right or not branding them, and this slows things down in court and makes it harder to import into trial presentation software. Alicia is part of the wonderful online courtroom project, and she can discuss this.
I know we're running out of time, so the online courtroom project, they are a group of attorneys, judges, social scientists, and trial technology consultants, and we put together a report. We're working on a white paper. We're publishing a book on best practices. So if you need any resources about what's going on regarding remote trials, you can check out the website for more information.
Okay, we have some resources here for you, and a checklist. So in the last couple of minutes, if anyone has a question, Alicia and I are available to answer whatever technology questions you may have.
Thanks so much to you both. We had one question pop up in the chat. Someone wanted to know can you suggest a good exterior microphone to purchase?
I like the snowball microphone that you showed before. You showed me that. I also have an Amazon Basics. I have this one. It's a little too big, but it works really well. It's an Amazon Basics microphone. There's some smaller ones out there. Read the reviews. Don't go with the cheapest option. The Logitech Brio camera has a microphone as well. That's what I'm using today. But I do like an external microphone typically right in front of me.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions that have popped up. You give people a minute if anyone has any further questions.
Don't be shy. Well, yeah, thank you so much for inviting us. I hope that this was helpful for all your members. And if anybody has questions about what technology to use, converting your courtroom, home office, I'm happy to answer any questions. The slides will be provided to all the attendees today, and we're here to answer any questions if you need us in the future.
Yeah, please reach out if you need anything.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I'm not seeing any other questions popping up, so we will let everyone go about their day. But thank you again to everyone for joining us. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to Alicia or Shannon. And if not, we will see everyone in March for our next CLE. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.